Good morning. It's Sunday, December 1st. And as a ranter, I come across a lot of odd ideas which I can elect to speak about. But the one I'm going to talk about today is very odd from my perspective. There's a group of people that were considering to have New York and several other states secede from the U.S. and join Canada to avoid Trump, right? Because these are Democratic states. Even though in New York, Trump did receive 44% of the vote, which is the highest that any Republican has received in recent memory. But still, there are many who are very dissatisfied with the fact that Donald Trump is president of the United States. So we have a Democratic New York State senator that has floated the fanciful proposition that her state and its neighbors to the northeast secede from the United States to join Canada to avoid President-elect Trump's return to office. Now, the person I'm talking about is Liz Kruger, and she chairs the New York State Senate Finance Committee. And she argued that New York State, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont could all suffer under Trump's new administration. And I know we will suffer. There's no question about it, because when he was president, he took a lot of the money that New York State gives to the federal government, and they distribute it to states that do not contribute their fair share. Now, that has happened not only with Trump, but with many of the other presidents. So when you take a look at this, right? So in her mind, when you look at Trump's proposed crackdown on immigration and his promise of mass deportation, that makes the Manhattan Democrat believe that liberal and sanctuary states such as New York could be threatened with cuts in the amount of federal money that they receive, a move the incoming leader and his cabinet have suggested. Now, can states refuse these new policy measures? No. And we know from past history that New York has been ripped off when we contribute huge sums of money to the federal government, only to have a small percentage of that money returned to us for our needs. And they distribute the heavy amount of money that New York contributes to the federal government to states that do not contribute anything near their fair share. Now, I am not saying that every state should give the money that New York gives, because every state can't afford that. But every state should give the same percentage of money. So if New York is giving 10%, every other state should give 10% of their revenues. And then that would be fair. But when we give 10% of our revenues, which is an immense amount, and then we get back a fiddling amount when we need it, that is not fair. And this is not the first time that this New York Democrat has offered up a radical and improbable counter to Trump's policies. And I have to admit that these policies have not been only by Trump, but he right now is the man on the hot spot. And so she suggested ahead of his election win that the bloc of blue states should join Canada. You think that that would be good for us? I don't know. It's a wild idea. But if we, the four states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and Vermont, if we, those four states, join Canada, what would that be? How do we know how Canada would treat us? I am not sure that they would treat us any better than we're getting treated right now in the U.S. It's a crazy idea, but crazy ideas come to mind when you consider that New York gave $362 billion in tax revenue to the federal government, and it gets back about $85 billion, and then we have to find other money to offset the cheating that we suffer under the federal government, under the federal funding of the state. That's not right. We're talking about a lot of money. And with President Trump's 2024 presidential victory, there has been a surge among Americans interested in moving abroad. And many are looking at Canada as a potential destination. So think about that. Think about we're getting ripped off. People are going to run to Canada. So I don't blame these crazy ideas of making New York and its fellow states Canadian. I wouldn't like that, though. Basically, everybody in these states that I'm talking about are relatively progressive individuals, and they would probably fit very well into the Canadian way of life. But I think we have to gut it out, and I think we have to fight for a fair share of the money that we contributed, and we should be fighting that every single state in this country produces their fair share. Some fixed percentage that every state is required to contribute. So that, in my mind, is a major injustice that has been going on, and it ought to be corrected. But I see very little chance of that correction coming under the presidency of Donald J. Trump. I leave you with that this morning. A conundrum that can't be washed away. Have a great day. Bye.